Protestant Americans, and most Americans were Protestants, were divided between the modernist and the fundamentalist. And this was basically an urban versus rural split. City folks tended to be modernist. They accepted science. They were able to incorporate science into their religious beliefs. If Darwin, presents the theory of evolution, shows evidence, they accept it, and they go, oh, well, then the 7 days that God took to create the earth must really mean the millions of years evolution took. The fundamentalists did not accept that. They said the Bible must be understood literally, and they rejected modern science, particularly the theory of evolution. They wanted a society that had religion at the center of life, not something you did on Sunday mornings. The modernists were much more interested in adapting religion to the modern world. In rural states, we see the teaching of evolution just flat outlawed. Tennessee is one of the states that does this. In 1925, they outlaw any teaching in a public school that contradicts the teaching of the Bible. The American Civil Liberties Union, which had been established in 1917 to defend people who were protesting against World War I from the government, because we were locking those people up, they offered to defend anybody who will teach evolution in a school where it is illegal. John T. Scopes is a substitute teacher. He goes in to teach science one day in a Tennessee school in Dayton, Tennessee, and is arrested for it. The ACLU will send down Clarence Darrow, who's probably the most famous lawyer in America. It is clear that Scopes is guilty. The fight is going to be over whether or not this law is legal or if it limits either the separation of church and state or free speech, if it somehow violates one part of the First Amendment. William Jennings Bryan, remember him? He had run for president 3 times, leader of the Populists, the Cowardly Lion from The Wizard of Oz. He will come out of retirement to defend Tennessee's law. He was, after all, a preacher. There are more reporters than citizens in Dayton, Tennessee. The whole thing becomes, it's the trial of the century. Now, we have trials of the century all the time, but this was one of the early trials of the century. You see the monkey there dressed up like a person, which is great. That's a way of mocking the evolutionist. The judge bars scientists from testifying. He says he will not allow science as a defense for the case. You can kind of see where the judge comes down. Scopes is, of course, found guilty, and he's fined $100, which William Jennings Bryan, to his great credit, pays the fine. Remember, he had been arguing against the teaching of evolution. But the case is broadcast on the radio, and honestly, William Jennings Bryan, to many people, comes off looking a bit like a fool. And Darrow is able to really publicly attack religion's opposition to evolution in a way that will kind of put this fight to bed for a long time. The evolutionist will kind of fade from the scene, and states will allow the teaching of evolution. A higher court eventually throws out the case altogether because they don't want to rule against the fundamentalists. The courts are fairly conservative, but they're clearly wrong legally, and so they refuse to rule on the case. Bryan had taken a stand as a witness and been cross-examined by Darrow, and if you ever get a chance to watch the movie Inherit the Wind or read the play or something, you should check it out. It's about this trial, and a lot of it is actually transcripts from the trial. And ultimately, legally, it's kind of a draw. But in reality, it's a win for the evolutionist. It kind of drives the fundamentalist movement underground. But they don't go away. They're going to be back. We're not done with them.